All right, so this screencast is for all of section 2 of chapter 6. So if we've already, if you already know the first half, it's still a great review. So here we go. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel. It's in the name. Parallelograms have two sets of parallel sides. So what I'm going to draw here, we have one set of parallel sides and we have our second set of parallel sides. This symbol, we read it as parallelogram PQRS. So notice that we have PQ and SR are parallel to each other. We also have QR and PS parallel to each other. Okay, that's the definition of parallelogram. So theorem 6.2 says, if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, then its opposite sides are congruent. So the opposite sides are parallel, as we just stated, but this theorem says that the opposite sides will be congruent. So what that means is this side and that side will be congruent, and then the opposite pair will also be congruent. So we have two parallelograms here. Notice they gave us the parallel symbols. Amazing. So because we have those parallel symbols, we can go through and say, you know what? These two sides are congruent. These two sides are congruent. So JH is going to be equal to 5 because it's the exact same length. And then we have FJ is going to be the same thing as what's across from it, which is 3. All right, ABCD is a parallelogram. Find AB and AD. So we've already gone over this in class. If you missed class, this is a great review. Make sure you pause as we go through. So AB. All right, notice we got these parallel symbols already on our parallelogram. Okay, so parallel symbols don't mean anything unless we got those congruent symbols as well. So 8 is, these two sides will be congruent to each other, and then we have these two sides that are opposite, will be the same length, congruent. So AB is 9 and AD is going to be 8. Awesome, so that is our first theorem. All right, if we go down, here are the next two. If a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, then its opposite angles are going to be congruent. So these are things you know are true. So we have these two angles will be the same measure. Then we have this P and R. This set of opposite angles will also be the same measure. Opposite angles will be congruent. All right, let's keep going. So we've learned a couple things so far. Opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. And finally, if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, then its consecutive angles are supplementary. So that means they will add to 180 degrees. So supplementary means adds to 180 degrees. So we know this already, but we all need practice with this. So remember I said these were the same opposite angles, congruent. Well, guess what? It means these two angles that are next to each other, the measure of angle P plus the measure of angle S together, they must equal 180. But also, these two angles, they're next to each other. So we say the measure of angle S plus the measure of angle R together must equal 180 as well. Whew, we can keep going around, right? Q and R must be supplementary. They must add to 180. And then lastly, Q and P, right? The two angles that are consecutive, that are next to each other in a parallelogram will add to 180 versus the ones across from each other will be congruent. All right, example 3, find the missing angle measure. Let's start with the easiest one. Check it out. P and R, they both will be 70 degrees. Opposite angles congruent. Q and P, well, they're not opposite, but they are consecutive. So I know the measure of angle Q plus the measure of angle P together must equal 180. So if we plug in for P, we have the measure of angle Q plus 70 equals 180. Subtract 70 from both sides. Guess what? Measure of angle Q, 110 degrees. We can put that in. And then, check it out. Q and S are opposite from each other. Opposite angles will be congruent. So this is 110 degrees as well. So we use a couple different things. Opposite angles congruent, consecutive. The angles are on the same side, right next to each other, will add to 180. Let's keep going. This angle is 105. Means the one across from it must also be 105 degrees. Okay, we're halfway there. We're cooking. Here we go. So I would like to find measure of angle C. Well, it is next to. It's consecutive with angle D. So if we add measure of angle C plus measure of angle D, they will add to 180. Consecutive angles in a parallelogram are supplementary. They will add to 180 degrees. So I fill in for what measure of angle D is. I subtract the 105 from both sides, and I see the measure of angle C is 75 degrees. All right, so this is 75 degrees. We use the fact that these two angles are consecutive. They will add to 180 versus, guess what? A crossed opposite angle is congruent. Amazing. So that was the first day, first half of the lesson. The second half, here we go. Theorem 6.5. So the last couple of things we need to know about a parallelogram. If we have a parallelogram, so because it's like, you know, ooh, check it out, we got parallelogram, immediately we know opposite sides are parallel. Okay, that's given. We know opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. These are all the things we know already. Okay, then its diagonals will bisect each other. Okay, so we have this diagonal and we have this diagonal. So bisect means cut into two equal parts. So these two parts, these two halves of that diagonal will be congruent to each other. And then the two halves of the other diagonal will be congruent to each other. Notice they don't have to be equal to, the green and the pink line don't have to be equal to each other. But the two green, because it's split exactly in half, bisect, we're splitting the diagonal exactly in half thanks to the previous diagonal. All right, let's go ahead and apply this theorem. So we have a parallelogram. Awesome. That means my diagonal right here is being split exactly by the purple one. Woo, exactly in half. That means this is also going to be 3. Well, check it out. We're looking for TX. TX is half of the green diagonal. And if I know that this length right here is 3, that means the other half of the diagonal must also be 3. This is just an application of our rules of parallelogram. All right, solve the proportion. So we did this in class. Let's go ahead and cross multiply. So cross multiply because we have the equal sign. 5x equals 48. Divide both sides. We have 48 over 5. So this is going to be, let's see, 9.8. 9.6? Let's see. 9.8. Yep, here we go. Let's keep going. Yeah, 9.6. 9.6. Okay. All right, 9.6. Perfect. Let's keep going. We can't simplify the fraction, so you can leave it in a fraction. I just know some people in class left it as 9.6. All right, keep cross multiplying. And so it's helpful if you use parentheses. So for instance, we have 4 times y plus 2 should equal 3 times y plus 1. Okay, so because I use parentheses, now it's very clear to see that I can distribute to both terms. And if you didn't do that, you're not going to come up with the right answer. Parentheses are your friend. Oops, this is 4y. I'm just making lots of mistakes today. All right, 4y plus 8. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 8 on both sides. I'm just going to show step by step for you. Subtract 3y on both sides, and we get y is equal to -5. Perfect. Go ahead, pause the video if you need to. Let's keep rolling along. All right, crisscross. So we have 3 times x equals 6 times x plus 2. Go ahead, pause the video at any moment. You can always try the problem and then continue on. All right, so don't forget, parentheses are your best friend. And then distribute out. I'll subtract 6x on both sides. That way I have -3x equals 12. Divide both sides. 12 divided by -3 is -4. Awesome. Last one, crisscross applesauce, cross multiply. So I have 4 times x minus 5 equals 2 times x plus 1. Distribute. Because I have those parentheses, I will make sure to distribute to all the terms. Okay, so far so good. I'm just doing the opposite operation. So I added 2x on both sides, simplify, add 20 to both sides, simplify, and then divide by 2, and we get the answer is 11. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. Believe this is the last page of notes. Awesome. Okay. Match the segment or angle in the parallelogram with a congruent one. Give your Give a reason for your answer. So JK is right here. That means the congruent one must be LM. And the reason is because opposite sides are parallel, right? These are opposite sides, and there are problems just like this in your homework. So you need to have this justification. You must justify your reasoning. All right, so let's keep going. Here we go, angle JKL. So JKL, this angle here will be congruent to this one. So we can say angle JML. JML is right here. And the reason is because opposite angles are congruent. Amazing. All right, MNL. So MNL is this angle. All right, so I'd like to know a matching angle. Well, this is a matching angle right here. And the reason is because it's a vertical angle. So I'm doing the easy part first, right? We know vertical angles are congruent. How do we name that angle? Well, we can't just say N. We must be specific. Because there's more than one angle at our vertex N, we have to use the 3 letters. So we're going to say this is JNK. Angle JNK. JNK right here. J to N to K. All right, let's keep going. So try to find the ones that are congruent before I say them. Okay, MLK. MLK, so that's this angle, which means this one, the opposite angle, will be congruent. So I can name this one angle MJK. And the reason for that is because opposite angles are congruent. Amazing. Keep going, JN. So JN is right here. It is half of the diagonal. We know diagonals bisect each other. So that means this will be a congruent segment, NL. NL will be congruent because diagonals bisect each other. Awesome. All right, last one we have NM. NM is here. Hey, check it out. That means this one must also be congruent to it. So we have KN. And the reasoning is exactly the same. Diagonals in a parallelogram are congruent, right? They bisect each other to make 2 congruent halves. So diagonals bisect each other. Awesome. All right, find the value of x and y in the parallelogram. Here we go. Well, opposite sides in a parallelogram are congruent. So let's stick with the 1 tick mark first. We have 9 equals x plus 1. Subtract 1, we get 8 is equal to x. All right, continue on. All right, these 2 will be congruent to each other. So 2y plus 3 equals 15 because they're opposite. Opposite sides are congruent. Subtract 3. Oops, 2y equals 12 divided by 2, and we get y is equal to 6. Amazing. Go ahead, pause the video, give this a shot before I go over it. Okay, so this half of the diagonal must be congruent to this half, so y is 4. This half of the diagonal must be congruent to this half of the diagonal, so x must be 2.5 because the diagonals bisect each other. Awesome, so go ahead. This video shouldn't take you too long. You can start your homework. Let me know if you have questions. As always, the bonus and Math Center are open.